Hello and welcome to Literary Prospects. I'm Kelley Vick, your host, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest. Born in Chicago, Illinois, and a member of the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana, Nick Medina writes horror, crime, and mystery fiction that pairs social issues with local and Native American folklore. His third novel, The Whistler, is out now. In addition to writing, Nick enjoys live music, ghost stories, and spending time with family. Nick Medina, thank you so much for being here today to talk about your terrifying new novel, The Whistler. This one has definitely given me a few bad dreams, and I know that I am not alone in this. The gloss says, The Whistler is an ambitious, spooky, sweat-drenching horror mystery. Medina has crafted heart-stopping prose that will have you imagining weird whistles and terror-induced nightmares sure to disrupt a good night's sleep. People calls The Whistler truly spooky. Daily Mom says The Whistler is slower burning, psychologically jagged horror, grounded in Native beliefs and modern dread. Medina, author of Sisters of the Lost Nation, knows how to craft folklore into something frighteningly personal. And trust, after this one, you'll think twice before whistling at anything after dark. And one more, Paste Magazine says, one of the best writers of Indigenous horror working right now. Nick Medina takes on what might be his most conceptually challenging book yet with The Whistler. Whether you're new to Medina or looking for another banger from the author, don't miss it. So, with all of that, welcome. And what can you tell us about The Whistler? How do you describe the book?
Well, thank you, Kelley. And I got to say, that was quite an intro. I'm going to have to replay that and listen to that on loop when I'm feeling bad about myself. I hadn't heard most of those reviews, so thanks for sharing all that. But yeah, The Whistler is about a young man who is hell-bent on becoming or an internet famous ghost hunter, and he ends up becoming, well, he takes things a little bit too far, and he ends up suffering an injury that leaves him paralyzed from the chest down. And as a result, he ends up haunted by, his past questionable behavior, and he might even be haunted by more than that.
What was the spark that got this story going for you?
The initial spark was actually a question from my editor, because in my previous book, Indian Burial Ground, I had left some things unanswered. And she asked me a question. She said, "Do you know what happens to this character?" And I don't want to say which character it is, just because of us. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who might be interested in picking it up. But I didn't have an answer to that question at that point. And so it was something that I think just worked its way into my mind. It was probably in my subconscious, and I was thinking about it. And I was actually working on another manuscript at the time, and I was developing the characters for that one. And one of the characters, which ended up being the main character of The Whistler, he kind of just stepped forward, and he established himself as a link to Indian Burial Ground. And after that, I was just kind of off and running, and pieces just started to fall into place. I had the superstition about never whistling in night in mind. So I was able to link that to a true crime case that I came across about a phantom whistler in Louisiana. And so all these things just kind of seemed to click. They made sense to go together, and The Whistler was born.
All right. I want to know a little bit more about this lore about whistling. And then I also have to know about this true crime whistler case.
Yeah, the superstition about never whistling at night is actually one that you can find in various cultures around the world, but it does play a strong role in many native cultures. And as with most folklore, it serves as a warning. It serves as a warning about the dangers of night. And they say that if you whistle at night, you just might attract evil entities or spirits or the wandering dead. In some cultures, they think it might be a witch or some other kind of frightening entity. But it's basically, saying don't disrupt the peace of night. Don't go out and do things that might get you in trouble. Respect the darkness, respect nature, and you will be okay. And then the case of the Phantom Whistler, that was just something that I came across pretty randomly. I was just reading, true crime documents online, and I came across this case about this young woman in 1950s, and she was living in Louisiana, which was something else that jumped out at me because all of my stories are set in Louisiana. So that was something that just kind of seemed like, oh, this might be a little bit too good to be true. It felt like I had to use it. But this young woman, her name was Jackie, she started to hear whistling outside her bedroom window, and she didn't know where it was coming from. She couldn't see anyone out there. And this whistling started to follow her. She would hear it in different places, wherever she would go. And then eventually she started receiving threatening phone calls. And no one ever found out who the Phantom Whistler was. But ultimately, the whistling did stop. Jackie never came to any harm. But of course, when I took that story and put my own twist on it, things got a little bit crazier than that, I'll say.
Things get a little worse.
Yeah, a little bit worse, a little bit bloodier.
Do you scare yourself when you're writing?
Sometimes, sometimes an idea will creep in and it'll kind of give me the chills, and I'll think, I got to work on that. I got to put that in the book somewhere. Um, but yeah, I usually try to come up with ideas that do scare me, and usually my writing does revolve around my own fears. The Whistler, for instance, deals with loss of autonomy, loss of
Mhm.
function with your own body. And that's something that I find terrifying. And so I did want to explore that a bit more and, find out what it's really like for someone who, experiences an injury that leaves them with, paralysis that ultimately changes every aspect of their lives. And it's not, obviously it's not an easy thing to deal with.
You, well, talking about that, you also did some extensive research, right,
Yeah.
in embodying that
A- a-
character.
Yeah, absolutely. That this was something that I knew I had to take very seriously. I didn't want this character to be um, inauthentic in any way, and I didn't want to sugarcoat anything or gloss over anything. I wanted to make sure that this character accurately represented someone who lives with paralysis. And
Mm.
so I spent quite a long time um, doing research online. That's where I started, and I was able to find many, many channels and like on YouTube or Instagram, all these different channels or accounts where young people, especially, post or they film and post all kinds of stuff from their lives, and they show you everything, every heartache, every challenge, every accomplishment as well. And it wasn't something that was easy to take in day after day because I was researching, for a couple months before I started writing the book, and to see how just in a split second your
Mhm.
life can be completely changed and you have to come up with a new plan for your life. And on
Mhm.
top of that, I was able to interview someone who's gone through it. His name's Peter. And Peter was 20 years old going on a road trip with his friends. They were going to go camping and hiking and kayaking. And Peter fell asleep at the wheel.
Oh.
And his van, or the SUV that they were in, rolled over and it ended up crushing his neck. And since then, for over a decade now, Peter has been a wheelchair user, and he lives with quadriplegia, paralyzed from the chest down, much like the character in the book.
Mhm.
And so Peter was extremely giving, and he answered every question that I had about what it's like to go through that, what it's like to try to recover from it, what it's like to deal with the losses and the pain and the heartache, and trying to come up with new plans for your life because um, he was in college studying to do something that would require him to use his body in specific ways, and he was no longer able to do that. He had to find a new path for himself, and he's come through it very well. And that's one of the things that was actually um, really encouraging about the process was seeing how inspirational so many of these people are, and how they don't give up and how they constantly search for new and different ways to do things. And I also went with Peter to an expo, the Abilities Expo, that was here in Chicago last summer. And so we were able to see all kinds of new technology that's being developed, all kinds of new tools that are out there now. And, it just really opened my eyes to a part of life that I think a lot of us don't pay attention to. And that's one of the things with people who are living with disabilities. They often feel unseen, overlooked, undervalued. And so I was just really hoping that with this character, maybe more people will become a little bit more aware of those types of things.
Yeah. And not only uh, is Henry dealing with quadriplegia, you're also highlighting the healthcare issues that Native Americans sometimes face
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
others
that's
don't.
a big issue in Indian country in the United States is that tribal nations had made treaties with the United States government. And the government had promised that um, Native Americans and indigenous populations would receive health care and adequate health care. And that's just not the case. It's largely underfunded. And natives and indigenous people often suffer suffer from higher rates of things like diabetes, heart disease, even acne, so many things that can be easily treated and addressed, but they're not because there's just not the funding for it. And again, it's all about being overlooked and unseen and, promises made, promises broken. So, more attention deserves to be, uh, you know, more people, I hope, will pay more attention to these issues, and hopefully we'll see some changes as a result.
Yeah. We heard in the blurbs as well um, that you craft folklore into something frighteningly personal. Is that in your mind when you set out, when you're working on a story, taking these folkloric elements and modernizing and personalizing?
Yeah, there's my approach involves a couple different different ideas, different things. First, I do want to try to keep some of this traditional storytelling alive and keep
Mhm.
these stories from disappearing. And they serve a purpose, and that purpose isn't just in the past. I want to point out that they are still purposeful today. And so I'm always searching for connections between what's going on in society today and how I can link those issues to the traditional tales, the traditional stories. And a lot of times the connections just come without me even having to really think about it. And part of that is because I am pretty familiar with a lot of different tales. I do read folklore or mythology, and it's something that I've always enjoyed.
Mhm.
So when I read something in the news, and that's really where a lot of my ideas for stories start, I'll read something in the news, and then it'll remind me of something from folklore that I've read. So, for instance, with my first novel, Sisters of the Lost Nation, it addresses the issue of Native and Indigenous women and girls going missing and being murdered, which is something that happens at an astounding rate. And when I was learning about that and reading about that, it reminded me of a native tale about a young a young woman, and she ultimately becomes this disembodied rolling head. And there were just so many similarities between that traditional tale and what was actually going on, or what is actually going on with young women and girls going missing, that it just seemed to make sense that those two things would go together.
Mhm.
Same thing with the Whistler. There were so many connections that I saw that I just felt like it was almost meant to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do try to make it personal. I do try to bring. I find that when you pair the two things, social issues with the traditional stories, they just seem to intensify each other.
Mm-hmm.
The folklore will make the real life horror even more horrific, and the real life horror will make the folklore that more horrific as well. So they just play together really well.
Yes. And speaking of playing together and the Whistler, there is a story that you weave throughout
Mhm.
the narrative, The Boy with Two Faces. Um, how did you decide? We won't go too much into trying to get these work, but how
Yeah,
did you decide on that kind of structure? Weaving together, obviously, the sort of modern with the folkloric images with the Whistler, but also actually having this tale kind of woven in certain chapters throughout the book.
I thought I thought by breaking up that story, I thought it would be a good opportunity to um, really create a connection between what was going on with Henry
Mhm.
and what's going on with this traditional tale, this old tale. Um, it just I felt like if I gave the whole story at once, then it wouldn't have as much impact because it would be ultimately as you're reading, you tend to forget little things here and there. So by breaking that tale up and interspersing it throughout the story of the Whistler and what Henry's going through, I just thought it would be a lot more effective. And then I would also be able to show different links between the past and the present. And I've heard from people who have read it and who've listened to the audiobook that they thought it worked really well. So I'm pretty happy with how it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, it works well. You, you've said that stories are puzzles in your mind. Can you explain that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For me, I always have to have certain pieces in order for me to want to move ahead with the story. So each piece on its own might be really interesting and have a lot of value, but until all those pieces come together, we don't have obviously the whole story or the whole picture, just like with like a jigsaw puzzle. So with the Whistler, I had various pieces in mind, but I didn't have everything I needed to start that story until I actually found that Phantom Whistler case that I was telling you about. That was
Mhm.
kind of the last major piece that I needed for the Whistler because I had the folklore, I had the superstition about not whistling at night. I knew I wanted to address paralysis and quadriplegia. So I had all these little things. Each one was its own separate component. But until I had that lore to help me link them all together, I didn't have the full picture just yet.
What does your process look like when you start to get that first inkling of an idea? Then what happens next? What does it look like going from that to when you're like handing in that final draft?
So it always starts with one piece of the puzzle, basically, and that piece has to be something that really excites me. And I think of it basically as like a spark. Is
Mhm.
that spark going to lead to a full-blown fire? And that's what you ultimately want for the story. So if I have a spark that gets me excited, my mind will just keep dwelling on it. A lot of it is just subconscious. You're thinking about it, and then you might just stumble in or stumble upon the next piece, and then it gets you or gets me even more excited, and then I just keep wanting to find more and more and more of these pieces to put together. And so for the first few days when an idea is taking hold, I'm usually just constantly scribbling notes, and I'll usually might just do it on my phone, or I'll write it on a random piece of paper, or whatever I have at hand. So then once I have all of these different notes with various ideas on it, then I'll sit down and I'll try to organize them, put them in some sort of order so that it will make sense. And then once I have that done, that's when I move on to creating an actual outline to give me a solid idea of, how this story is going to proceed, beginning, middle, end. And then once I have a solid outline, then that's when I'll start working on the first draft. So I'm someone who likes to be very prepared. I like to know where I'm going or what I'm doing every day. So I won't start writing until I have a solid outline that basically lets me know, okay, here's what you're working on today. And it just keeps me focused and moving forward.
Do you find that you stick to the outline, or once you really start writing, does it change a lot?
It changes a lot every day. And it's, it's really interesting to me how it happens because it's so unexpected. I'll just be writing and I'll be working on what I had, written in that outline, but then, maybe a character will say something that I hadn't expected, just
Mm.
come out. And then that, just one line of dialogue might inspire another storyline. And then suddenly you're off and running in a different direction. or it'll inspire, just an idea that, oh, I can return to this at a different point in the book and I could create another link. Uh, so that's actually the really fun part, is just kind of seeing where things go. So yeah, the outline is not concrete. It's just there to give me an idea of what I want to do and what I want to work on. But I always leave things open, and I'm always going in different directions because, I might write the outline a couple months before I write the actual draft, or by the time I get to the end of the first draft. Obviously, there's been a few months between when I wrote the outline and when I got to that point in the book. So, your mind is constantly thinking and going in different directions, and so you might come up with something better. That's just kind of the fun of it. And I'm always looking forward to seeing, okay, what's going to happen today when I sit down to write? Where is this going to lead?
How many drafts do you normally do?
It depends. For the first books, the earlier books, we had a lot of drafts. I don't even know what the number was. It just seemed like it kept going and going and going. So far, with the Whistler, we got it down to maybe 3 or 4 drafts. It really wasn't that many. And now with my book that's coming out next year, um, I just started working on I think it's the third draft, and I'm not sure, but it might be the final draft. So, you know, maybe I'm just learning more and figuring out more how to do this, and reducing the number of times we have to go back and redo stuff. But um, yeah, it just depends. I'm always open to feedback, so I always wait and see what my editor has to say, and then after that, that's when I'll start working on another draft if necessary.
You've talked about having a really close, solid working relationship with your editor. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure, yeah. My editor, her name is Sarir, and we've worked together on all 3 of my books so far, or actually, well, moving on to the fourth one. So, 4 books so far, and I just feel like we make a really good team. We don't, um, we're in communication when we need to be. We don't bug each other too much. I know I can trust her, and I have, full confidence that she has the best or my best interest in mind. And that kind of relationship, I think, is really important because for me, um, I had been writing since I was a kid, but I was always really shy to show my writing to other people.
Mm.
And for me, it's important to have someone I feel comfortable with, and someone I feel like I can be open and honest with, and not have any kind of hesitation or reservations when it comes to what we're working on. So I've found a really great partner with Sarir, working on these things, and I trust her judgment, and she has really great ideas, and she always knows how to take things in different directions and just kind of take things to the next level. And it's been a really fun opportunity working with her, but also a really great learning process for me because I'd never been through publishing a book before. So I needed someone who could show me the ropes and take control when I needed them to take control. So yeah, it's just been a really great working relationship with Sarir, and I'm lucky to work with someone like that.
You said that you'd been writing since you were a kid, but you also
Mhm.
said it was hard for you to show your work, to trust someone to show your work. So when did you start showing the work?
Well, that's actually kind of the funny thing. I was talking to another author not too long ago about that, because sometimes when I read like an afterword or acknowledgments, I see that people have so many advisors or people that they turn to and writing groups, and they list all these names of people who helped give them feedback on their book, and I only show it to my editor. Only one person reads my work before that. Maybe my agent, if necessary, but basically my editor and I are the only two who see it in advance. Uh, so for me, it can be very uncomfortable showing my writing to other people. But I did start sending out short stories when I was in college, and I was able to get a number of them published in small, publications, online things, and journals and stuff like that. So eventually I became a little bit more comfortable, and then that's when I decided that I want to start focusing on novels and longer form fiction, move away from the short stories. And so um, you know to do that, you just have to kind of put yourself out there. So I started querying literary agents, trying to find if anyone had any interest in my work. And that was a long, slow, even defeating process at times, a lot of rejections. But yeah, eventually I found the people I needed and people who enjoyed what I wrote, and I'm here today.
Well, can you go a little bit more into that part of it, of the finding the people that you needed? What was the road to publication
Sure.
point?
Yeah, well, it basically started with querying, sending out query letters to agents. And I was able to get an agent in 2017. And that ultimately didn't work out. Nothing sold. None of my work went anywhere with that agent. So at that point, actually, um, there have been kind of a string of just kind of lucky things in my career. But I was just on Twitter one day, and I happened to see a post about a program called Pitch Wars, where
Mm.
unpublished authors could submit their work to three authors who have already been published or editors. And so I just went through the list and I looked for three people who I thought might be interested in my style of writing, and I submitted to those three people. And I heard back from one of them, and her name is Tenon Jones, and she had a book published in 2020 called The Better Liar. And she responded and said that she was really interested in my pitch and wanted to work with me. And so we spent a couple months working on Sisters of the Lost Nation. And then at the end of Pitch Wars, they open it up to agents to come in and look at the work that all of these unpublished authors like me had been working on with their mentors. And at the end of that process, we had 14 literary agents who were interested in my first novel.
Wow.
And yeah, it was just a really lucky break. I think about that all the time. What if I hadn't chosen Tenon from that list? What if she hadn't responded? Who knows where I would be today? But I give her all the credit. Every one of my books, I thank her because she really helped kick things off for me. But yeah, I ended up choosing an agent from that list of 14, and we signed in 2021. And it was actually 5 months to the day of signing, she was able to get me my first book deal, which was
Wow.
incredibly fast in the publishing industry. Yeah,
Wow.
things
And
just kind
then
of there.
and then how much longer until the time between when you signed and got the deal and then the actual book coming out, how long did that take?
So we signed in August of 2021 with a publisher.
Mhm.
Berkeley is my publisher. And the book was scheduled to come out in April of 2023. So it was a little over a year, maybe about a year and a half. And of course, during that time, we were still working on the book because the publisher, of course, has their own vision as well. So the book, again, went through a lot of editing, changes, revisions. We actually changed the whole structure of the book because I had written it chronologically. Uh,
Mm.
my editor had this great idea of breaking it up and doing it in an order that isn't chronological. So one chapter might take place on day 36, the next chapter is day 7. So that was actually a big challenge itself, trying to find how to make a story work with a structure that isn't linear. And that one went through a lot of drafts. Just trying to figure out the right thing and make sure everything makes sense so that people aren't confused when reading it, since it does move around so much. But yeah, it was about a year and a half from signing with the publisher until that book actually came out.
What do you know now that maybe you wish you had known before publishing that first book?
Um, it's I think I had this idea that an author just gets to write and then the book gets published, and you just keep getting to write and that's your main job. But there's a lot more to the job than just being the writer. Doing things like this, putting yourself out there. I didn't realize how how what's the right word? I want to say public, but how how visible you have to be. I had never had an Instagram account before. I wasn't really into social media. This is so much of this stuff came as a bit of a surprise, but it's a big learning, or for me, it was a big learning process. Learning how to promote a book, how to try to get people interested in it. Trying to create interesting posts online. All of that stuff. Maybe I would have spent more time thinking about that beforehand, or even setting myself up for that, at least getting into the world of social media more. So then it would have been a smoother transition into what it takes to actually promote a book. But yeah, there's a lot of voices as well, a lot of opinions, and you have to be ready for all that kind of stuff. And I hadn't necessarily thought about that before.
It's interesting because as I'm listening to you say that now, I'm thinking about Henry and the sort of one of the themes in The Whistler seems to be our obsession with social media
Yeah,
and likes, maybe to the detriment of
yeah.
us.
Social media gives all of us the opportunity now to be stars in a sense. You go viral, and if you can keep going viral, you can have a following of millions or more. It's kind of crazy how the world has changed in such a short period of time, where everyone, it seems like, is chasing followers and likes and validation through you know online online engagement. And um, for some people, I think they just have a knack for it, but for other people, it can be tough. Like for me, it's not my strong suit, I don't think, but I am working on it and trying to get better at it, and we'll see where it goes.
Do you, how do you keep from burnout? Do you
I don't,
burn
I don't know yet. Yeah, I it's tough. For me, um, I keep saying I'm going to take a vacation, and I haven't yet. It's been years since I've had a real vacation. I do a lot of traveling for work, which is nice. I'm actually going to New York tomorrow. I get to go to Comic Con for the first time. I've never been to a Comic Con, but I'm going to do a panel there on Friday. But for me, I think the thing that helps the most is just um, physical activity. I try to do something every day that gets me moving and gets my mind off the work stuff, and just kind of releases stress that way. And for me, that's the best way to avoid burnout. Also, trying to just get rest, which can be tough, but I do my best.
especially when you're reading scary stories? What's your favorite piece of advice, favorite, best, for aspiring authors?
It's a good one. I would say be true to yourself, because it can be very easy to look at what other people are doing and think, well, they've been successful, so I have to do something similar or copy that.
Mm,
Uh, but that might not get you very far. And even though, for me, it took a long time to, like I said, find the people who are interested in my work and to get my lucky break. But I did stay true to what I wanted to write. I stayed true to the things that had interested me and which had scared me, and which I thought needed more attention. Because my books fall into a category that is now growing. They call it Indigenous horror,
mm.
but it's not something that is very mainstream. At least at the time when I started, it's becoming more mainstream now. Um, so in that way, I feel a sense of accomplishment. And I do feel proud of being able to contribute to that part of the literary world,
Mm.
and to be able to bring voices and communities, and increase awareness for issues that have gone ignored for so long. And I think if you stay true to yourself and what's important to you, it's going to be more rewarding in the long run.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. We have a traditional last question on this podcast, and it is, when The Whistler becomes a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Wow. Well, I'm mean, there's got to be a creepy whistle somewhere in there. Um, that's a great question. I hadn't thought about that. When I've been trying to create stuff for social media, I've been looking up different songs with whistles in them, and there's one song, and I can't remember the name of it. And it's something with White Buffalo, but it's kind of eerie, and I would have to look it up for you. But maybe something along those lines, something with, something that would have kind of this southern rock feel, but also,
Mm.
um, because that's something in the book as well. Henry's really into music, rock and roll. So I would want something with kind of a rockish feel, but also kind of a folk feel, since we're dealing with folklore and stuff like that. So yeah, something with those kind of vibes. I don't know if that's the best answer, but
It is. It's a great
hopefully it gives you
answer.
an idea of at least the tone of what I would be looking for.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it will work great. Maybe something original. An original.
Even like since it deals with Louisiana and entities, I don't know if you're familiar with, do you remember True Blood? Do you know the theme song
Yeah.
from True Blood?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to do bad things, or do bad
Yeah.
things to you. Like that kind of vibe would be pretty cool too.
Oh, yeah. That'd be really cool. But with a whistle.
Yeah, with a whistle worked in.
Nick Medina, thank you so, so much for joining today. It has been great fun getting to talk with you.
You as well. Thank you so much, Kelley. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.